In the vastness of space, where countless species have risen and fallen, one truth remains constant. When the universe breaks you, it rarely offers a second chance. The Galactic Medical Coalition had protocols for everything, every known species, every possible injury, every conceivable scenario. But they had never encountered anything quite like humans. When the distress beacon pierced through the void from the mining station on Kepler 442c, the response team expected another routine extraction. Mineral poisoning, equipment failure, maybe a cave-in. What they found instead would shatter everything the galaxy thought it knew about compassion, sacrifice, and what it truly means to heal. Dr. Vexai had seen 1,000 different ways sentient beings could suffer. In 37 years of interstellar medicine, the Zentorian had built a reputation for clinical excellence and emotional detachment. It was a survival mechanism in a profession where attachment meant heartbreak, and heartbreak meant compromised judgment. But nothing in Vexai's extensive training had prepared them for the sight that awaited in Mining Complex 7. A human, bloodied and broken, cradling an alien child who should have been dead hours ago, whispering words that somehow kept impossible hope alive in the crushing darkness of space. This is the story of the day the galaxy learned that sometimes the greatest medicine isn't found in any medical bay. It lives in the hearts of those brave enough to kneel in the dirt and whisper, "Easy, buddy, I've got you." The emergency beacon cut through hyperspace like a scream, its distress code painting urgent red patterns across the bridge displays of the GMC restoration. Dr. Vexai barely looked up from the neural mapping they were studying, their forearms continuing to manipulate the holographic brain tissue with practiced precision. After 3 decades in emergency medicine, distress calls had become background noise, tragic, necessary, but routine. Mining Station Kepler 442c reporting catastrophic structural failure, announced navigator kicks from the bridge. Multiple casualties, requesting immediate medical evacuation. ETA 17 standard minutes, came the crisp response from Captain Thorne. Dr. Vexai, prep for mass casualty protocol. Vexai's secondary arms paused their work while the primary ones continued mapping neural pathways. Their species had evolved on a world where multitasking meant survival, and 37 years of interstellar medicine had honed those instincts to a razor's edge. Casualty count and species manifest. Unknown. The beacons automated, no direct communication established yet. That gave Vexai pause. Mining operations typically maintained constant communication with the Galactic Mining Consortium. For a facility to go dark except for emergency beacons suggested either total power failure or something much worse. Their mandible clicked once, a Zentorian gesture of concern, before all forearms moved to pack their emergency kit. The standard GMC medical bag contained treatment protocols for 43 different species. Nanohealers for Rigelian cellular regeneration, crystalline matrices for Epsilon Eridani energy beings, atmospheric processors for methane-breathing titans. Each species had evolved different biological systems, different pain thresholds, different concepts of what constituted healing. The Coalition had spent centuries cataloging these differences, creating universal treatment protocols that could save lives regardless of what planet you called home. But as Vexai secured the final medical scanner in its housing, they couldn't shake the feeling that today would test those protocols in ways they weren't prepared for. The restoration dropped out of hyperspace with a characteristic blue-white flash that announced their arrival to any functioning sensors. Kepler 442c hung before them like a wounded animal, a brown and gray planet scarred by centuries of deep mining operations. The mining station itself clung to the planet's surface like a metal parasite, its superstructure partially collapsed, and emergency lights painting everything in hellish red. Reading 73 life signs, reported scanner technician Yith, concentrated in the lower mining levels. But Captain, Yith's voice carried the uncertainty that came with readings that didn't make sense. I'm detecting one human biosignature, and it's doing something I've never seen before. Captain Thorne's eyebrows rose. Humans were uncommon in this sector. They preferred their own medical protocols and rarely requested Coalition assistance. Doing what? The humans' biometrics are impossible. Heart rate at dangerous levels, stress hormones through the roof, but brain activity suggests they're in a state of intense focus. And, Captain, They're in direct contact with 17 other life forms, including several that should be dead based on their vital signs. Vex-High felt their stomachs, all three of them, clench with anticipation. Humans were an enigma in galactic medicine. They had only recently joined the coalition, and their biological responses to trauma were unlike anything in the medical databases. Where most species shut down non-essential functions during critical injury, humans seemed to tap into reserves that shouldn't exist. Their medical literature was filled with cases of humans performing impossible feats under stress. Mothers lifting vehicles to save children, soldiers fighting on with mortal wounds, rescue workers functioning for days without sleep. The coalition medical community had dismissed most of these accounts as exaggeration or species-centric mythology. After all, biological systems had limits. Physics had laws. No species could consistently override their evolutionary programming just through force of will. But as the Restoration's shuttle descended toward the mining station, Vex-High wondered if they were about to witness something that would challenge everything they thought they knew about the limits of sentient biology. The shuttle bay of the mining station was a chaos of twisted metal and emergency lighting. Automated fire suppression systems had long since exhausted their reserves, leaving the air thick with smoke and the acrid smell of burned electronics. Vex-High and their medical team moved quickly through the wreckage, following the life sign readings toward the lower levels. The first casualties they encountered were standard mining injuries. Rigelian workers with radiation burns from damaged antimatter conduits. A Betelgeusian engineer trapped under fallen support beams with 3 broken legs. Vex-High's team moved with practiced efficiency, nano-healers, and regeneration matrices working to stabilize patients for transport to the Restoration's medical bay. But as they descended deeper into the complex, the nature of the situation became clear. This hadn't been an accident. Sensor readings showed evidence of deliberate structural sabotage. Someone had targeted the primary support columns with military-grade explosives, bringing down entire sections of the mining complex. The fact that anyone had survived at all was remarkable. Dr. Vex-High called medical technician Zura over the comm. "I've found the main casualty site. Level 7, mining shaft complex. But, Doctor, you need to see this yourself." Vex-High made their way through increasingly unstable corridors, their emergency scanner painting green pathways through the twisted metal. As they approached level 7, they began to hear something that made their mandibles click in confusion. Singing. Someone was singing in the darkness below, a low, rhythmic human voice carrying a melody that seemed to weave through the groans of stressed metal and the hiss of escaping atmosphere. As Vex-High descended the emergency ladder to the mining level, the scene that greeted them challenged every protocol in their medical training. In the center of a collapsed chamber, surrounded by tons of fallen rock and twisted support beams, a human male sat cross-legged on the ground. His clothes were torn and bloodied, his left arm hung at an unnatural angle, and diagnostic scans showed at least 3 broken ribs and signs of severe internal bleeding. By all medical logic, he should have been unconscious or dead. Instead, he was singing softly to 17 different alien children who lay in various states of critical injury around him. His functional right hand moved from one small form to another, checking pulses, adjusting makeshift bandages, offering words of comfort in a dozen different languages. Some of the children belonged to species Vex-High had never seen before, exotic races from the Outer Rim who rarely traveled to Coalition space. But it was what the human was doing that made Vex-High stop in their tracks. Every time he touched one of the children, their vital signs stabilized. Heart rates that had been erratic found steady rhythm. Breathing that had been labored became easier. Brain activity that had shown signs of critical trauma suddenly showed patterns of rest and healing. "Easy, buddy," the human whispered to a small Altarian child whose blue skin had faded to near white with blood loss. "I know it hurts, but you're going to be okay. Just keep breathing with me, all right? In and out, that's it." As he spoke, the child's color began to return. Vital signs that had been flatlined 20 minutes ago were showing steady, healthy patterns. Vex-High's 4 arms trembled as they checked their scanner readings again. This was impossible. The human had no medical equipment, no nano-healers, no regeneration matrices. He was using nothing but physical contact and vocalization to achieve results that should have required the most advanced medical technology in the galaxy. "Sir," Vex-High called out, their voice carrying the authority of 37 years of medical practice. I'm Dr. HFY with the Galactic Medical Coalition. I need you to step away from the patients so we can begin proper treatment. The human looked up, and HFY saw eyes that held depths of exhaustion and determination they had never encountered in any species. Doctor, thank the stars you're here. These kids have been trapped for 6 hours. I've been doing what I can, but they need real medical attention. Sir, you're critically injured yourself. Our priority is to get you to a medical bay immediately. The human shook his head, wincing as the movement pulled at his injured ribs. Can't leave them. Every time I stop touching them, their vitals crash. I don't understand it, but somehow my being here is keeping them stable. HFY's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation. That's impossible. Physical contact cannot override biological trauma of this magnitude. Please step aside and allow proper medical protocol. Doctor, the human said, his voice taking on an edge of steel that cut through HFY's professional certainty. I know you've got training and equipment and all the fancy coalition protocols, but these kids have been dying for 6 hours, and the only thing that's kept them alive is me sitting here holding their hands and telling them they're going to be okay. So maybe, just maybe, your protocols don't know everything about what it takes to heal. Before HFY could respond, the small Altarian child began to convulse. Vital signs that had been steady moments before spiked into the critical range. HFY moved quickly, pulling out a neural stabilizer designed specifically for Altarian physiology. But the human was faster. His hand settled gently on the child's forehead, and he began speaking in fluent Altarian, a language that required 3 different vocal cords to pronounce correctly. Little star, the bad dreams can't find you here. Listen to my voice. Feel my hand. You're safe now. The scary part is over. Impossibly, the child's convulsions stopped. Their breathing steadied. The critical readings on HFY's scanner dropped back to stable ranges. How did you learn to speak Altarian? HFY asked, their voice barely a whisper. The human smiled, though was strained with pain and exhaustion. Kid taught me over the last few hours. Amazing how much you can learn when someone's depending on you. HFY stared at the human in disbelief. Altarian was considered one of the most difficult languages in the galaxy to master. Most coalition translators required years of study and cybernetic vocal enhancements to achieve even basic communication. For a human to learn enough Altarian in 6 hours to calm a traumatized child suggested cognitive abilities that existed far outside established human parameters. What's your name? HFY asked. Marcus Chun. I'm a mining engineer. Was working level 4 when the explosion started. Marcus's hand moved to another child, a small draconian whose scales had gone gray with shock. Immediately, color began returning to the small being's reptilian features. Found these kids trapped down here when the first responder teams couldn't reach them. Couldn't just leave them. Mr. Chun, you've sustained injuries that require immediate treatment. If you don't receive medical attention soon, you could die. Marcus looked up at HFY with those impossible eyes that held a kind of stubborn hope that the doctor had never encountered in 3 decades of emergency medicine. Doc, I'm not going anywhere until every one of these kids is safe. If that means I die keeping them alive until you can figure out how to save them, then that's what happens. HFY felt something shift in their chest, a sensation they hadn't experienced since their first year of medical school, before professional detachment had become a survival mechanism. This human was challenging everything they understood about medicine, about biology, about the very nature of healing itself. That's not how medical protocol works, HFY said, but their voice lacked the conviction it had carried moments before. Then, maybe it's time to write new protocols, Marcus replied softly, his attention already returning to the children around him. As HFY watched this broken human somehow hold 17 dying beings away from death through nothing more than presence and determination, they realized they were witnessing something that would change their understanding of medicine forever. The question was, were they brave enough to let it? For the next 2 hours, Dr. HFY watched their understanding of medicine crumble piece by piece. Every protocol they attempted to implement was met with the same impossible reality. The moment Marcus Chun moved away from any of the children, their vital signs crashed toward critical failure. The moment he returned, speaking in their native languages with words he shouldn't know, touching them with hands that somehow carried healing, they stabilized. HFY's medical team had set up a full field hospital in the collapse chamber. Nanohealers hummed with power. Regeneration matrices cast their blue healing light across the wounded, and atmospheric processors worked to maintain optimal breathing conditions for a dozen different species. But all their advanced technology seemed secondary to whatever Marcus was doing with nothing more than human compassion. "This is Dr. Vexhai," to Captain Thorne. They spoke into their comm device, trying to keep professional composure while their worldview underwent systematic destruction. "We have a situation that requires immediate consultation with Coalition Medical Command." "Report, Doctor." Vexhai looked at Marcus, who was now teaching a small Centaurian child how to count in Standard Galactic while gently massaging circulation back into the child's injured limbs. "Captain, I need you to contact Dr. Yolenkresh at Medical Command. Tell him we have a human demonstrating physiological healing abilities that fall outside all known parameters." "Clarify, Doctor." "The human is somehow maintaining life functions in 17 critically injured children through physical contact and vocalization. Our instruments show that his presence is literally preventing death in cases where death should be biologically inevitable." There was a long pause on the comm. "Doctor, are you suggesting some form of telepathic healing?" "I don't know what I'm suggesting, Captain. I'm reporting what I'm observing, and what I'm observing challenges fundamental assumptions about biological medicine." Marcus looked up from the Centaurian child. "Doc, you okay? You sound stressed." "Vet not even get zapd. Mister Chun, what you're doing is impossible according to every medical text in the galaxy. How are you explaining this to yourself?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, considering the question while his hands continued their methodical movement from child to child. "My grandmother used to say that healing isn't about fixing what's broken. It's about reminding what's hurt that it remembers how to be whole." "That's not medicine, Mr. Chun. That's philosophy." "Maybe," Marcus said with a tired smile. "But these kids are alive when they should be dead. So maybe your medicine needs some philosophy." Before Vexhai could respond, their scanner began chiming with urgent warnings. One of the children, a young being from a species Vexhai didn't recognize, with crystalline skin and eyes like liquid starlight, was showing signs of massive organ failure. Every system was shutting down simultaneously. "Marcus!" The child's name came out as a whisper from crystalline lips. Marcus was at the child's side instantly, despite his own injuries. His broken left arm had been stabilized in a medical brace, but movement still caused visible pain. "Hey there, Kira. You're okay, sweetheart. I'm right here." "Hurts," the child managed in heavily accented Standard. "I know it hurts, but pain means you're fighting, and fighting means you're alive. Can you tell me about your home again? The crystal gardens you showed me in your drawings?" As Marcus spoke, his hand settled gently on the child's forehead. Vexhai watched their instruments in fascination and growing alarm. The child's failing organs were somehow finding new energy. Cellular regeneration was occurring at rates that should have been impossible without direct intervention from advanced medical technology. "The flowers sing," Kira whispered. "When the star wind touches them, they sing songs that make the air shimmer." "That sounds beautiful. Will you show me those gardens someday? When we get out of here?" "Promise." "I promise, little star." Vexhai realized they were witnessing something that hadn't been documented in any medical literature. Marcus wasn't just keeping the children alive. He was somehow transferring his own life force to sustain them. Scans showed that his own cellular energy was being depleted with each healing interaction, but instead of weakening him, it seemed to make his determination stronger. "Dr. Vexhai," came a voice from behind them. Medical technician Zara approached with readings from the upper levels. "We've finished evacuating the other survivors. 43 beings total, most with standard mining accident injuries. But, Doctor, the explosive patterns suggest this wasn't random sabotage." "Explain." "Someone targeted the children's level specifically. The explosions were designed to collapse this section while leaving escape routes from the adult work areas open." Vexhai felt their stomachs clench with understanding. Someone wanted the children dead. It looks that way. And, according to station records, most of these children belong to species that have been vocal about opposing expanded mining operations in their home systems. Marcus's head snapped up from where he was comforting a small Andromedan whose bioluminescent spots were finally beginning to glow again. "Someone tried to murder these kids?" "The evidence suggests a targeted attack," Vexhai confirmed. "Which means whoever did this might try again." For the first time since Vexhai had arrived, they saw something dangerous flicker in Marcus's eyes. Not anger exactly, but something colder and more focused. How long until your ship can safely transport them? With proper medical support, we can move them in 3 hours. Then we have 3 hours to keep them alive and stable. Mr. Chun, you've been maintaining their life functions for 8 hours. Human physiology has limits. You need rest, food, medical attention for your own injuries. Marcus looked around at the children, some sleeping peacefully for the first time since the collapse, others awake and drawing pictures in the dust with their fingers while he told them stories. Doc, I appreciate your concern, but I've never been more sure of anything in my life. These kids are going home to their families. All of them. Whatever it takes. Vexhai realized they were facing a decision that would define their entire medical career. They could continue following coalition protocols, which demanded they prioritize the most medically rational treatment options. Or they could acknowledge that sometimes healing required stepping beyond the boundaries of what medical science considered possible. Dr. Vexhai to Medical Team Alpha. They spoke into their comm. I want full-spectrum monitoring on all 17 pediatric patients. And I want continuous scans on Mr. Chun. We're going to document exactly what's happening here. Doctor, Zura looked confused. Are we treating this as a standard medical situation? Vexhai looked at Marcus, who is now teaching a small group of conscious children a human lullaby in Standard Galactic, while simultaneously monitoring the breathing patterns of 3 unconscious patients. No, Technician Zura. We're treating this as something entirely new. Over the next hour, Vexhai's instruments recorded phenomena that would eventually revolutionize galactic medicine. They documented how Marcus's heart rate synchronized with each child he touched, how his brain activity somehow created resonance patterns that stabilized failing neural systems, how his voice at specific frequencies could trigger healing responses in species he had never encountered before today. But, more importantly, they documented something that couldn't be measured by instruments. The way hope spread from one person to 17 others, creating a network of healing that transcended biology and entered the realm of something deeper. Dr. Vexhai, Marcus called softly. I need to tell you something. What is it, Mr. Chun? I don't think I'm going to be able to let go of them when your ship arrives. What do you mean? Marcus looked exhausted, but somehow more alive than anyone Vexhai had ever met. I mean, whatever's happening here, this connection, I don't think it can be broken without killing them. They're not just staying alive because I'm touching them. They're staying alive because they trust me to keep them safe. And if I break that trust, Mr. Chun, we can provide full medical support aboard our ship. Advanced healing chambers, species-specific treatment protocols. Doc, look at your readings. Really look at them. These kids aren't healing because of medical technology. They're healing because they believe they're going to be okay. And the only reason they believe that is because I promised them they would be. Vexhai checked their instruments again, and, with growing amazement, realized Marcus was right. The children's healing wasn't following any known medical pattern. Their bodies were regenerating not because of nano-healers or regeneration matrices, but because they had somehow found the will to fight for life. And that was directly connected to their faith in this one human who had refused to leave them behind. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that maybe healing isn't about fixing broken parts. Maybe it's about convincing the broken parts that they want to be whole again. As if to prove his point, little Kira, the crystalline child who had been dying an hour ago, sat up and offered Vexhai a drawing she had made in the dust. It showed a human figure surrounded by stars, each star representing one of the children. At the bottom, in shaky letters, she had written, "Marcus makes the hurt go away." Vexhai stared at the drawing and realized they were looking at the most important medical discovery in galactic history. Not a new drug or surgical technique, but proof that healing required more than just repairing tissue and balancing chemistry. Sometimes it required something much rarer, someone willing to sit in the darkness and promise that morning would come. Mr. Chun, Vexhai said quietly, I think it's time for the Coalition to learn some new protocols. Marcus smiled, and for the first time since the doctor had arrived, it wasn't strained with pain or exhaustion. It was the smile of someone who knew that sometimes the most important medicine came from a simple act of refusing to give up on others. Welcome to Human Medicine, Document. Where the impossible happens, the call from Coalition Medical Command came exactly 47 minutes after Dr. Vexhai's initial report. Captain Thorne's voice carried the weight of bureaucratic concern as it echoed through the makeshift medical station in the collapsed mining chamber. Dr. Vexhai, command is requesting immediate clarification on your filed reports. Director Kresh wants to speak with you directly. Vexhai looked at Marcus, who is currently helping two of the older children, a Betelgeuse girl and a young Rigelian boy, practice breathing exercises that somehow seem to accelerate their healing rates. Even after 10 hours of continuous care, the human showed no signs of stopping. Patch me through, Captain. The holographic projection of Director Yolan Kresh materialized in a cramped space, his Vulcanoid features set in their characteristic expression of scientific skepticism. Kresh had overseen galactic medical protocol for 15 years, and his reputation for dismissing unsubstantiated claims was legendary. Dr. Vexhai, I've reviewed your initial reports, and I must tell you, the claims you're making border on medical fantasy. Director, I'm transmitting real-time data from our field instruments. The readings are authentic. The readings show impossible biological interactions. A human with no medical training somehow maintaining life functions in 17 critically injured children of different species, using nothing but physical contact and vocalization. Kresh's tone carried the condescension of someone who had spent decades dealing with field medics who let stress compromise their judgment. Yes, sir. That's exactly what I'm reporting. Doctor, you're a respected member of the Coalition Medical Corps. 37 years of exemplary service, which is why I'm giving you the opportunity to revise these reports and provide a more realistic assessment of the situation. Vexhai felt their mandibles click in irritation. Director, with respect, I'm not filing fantasy reports. I'm documenting a medical phenomenon that challenges our understanding of healing. Marcus looked up from where he was gently massaging circulation back into a small Tau Cetian's injured fins. Doc, problems with the brass? Director Kresh, I'd like you to speak directly with Mr. Chun, the human. Kresh's expression suggested he considered this a waste of time. Very well. Marcus wiped his hands on his torn shirt and moved closer to the holographic projection, careful not to break physical contact with the nearest children. Hello, Director. Marcus Chun, mining engineer. Mr. Chun, Dr. Vexhai has filed reports claiming you're performing medical miracles with these children. Marcus glanced at Vexhai, then back at the hologram. I wouldn't call them miracles. I'd call them people worth saving. The doctor claims you've learned multiple alien languages in a matter of hours and are somehow maintaining their life functions through physical contact. Well, sir, when someone's dying and the only comfort you can offer them is understanding what they're saying, you learn pretty fast. And as for keeping them alive, Marcus's hand settled on the head of the small crystalline child, Kira, who immediately sighed in contentment. I don't know how it works. I just know it does. Director Kresh's expression shifted from skepticism to clinical interest. Mr. Chun, the Coalition has spent centuries developing medical protocols based on scientific principles. What you're describing contradicts fundamental laws of biology. Maybe your laws are incomplete. The simplicity of the statement hung in the air like a challenge. Vexhai watched Kresh's face cycle through surprise, indignation, and, finally, reluctant curiosity. Explain. Marcus was quiet for a moment, his attention divided between the conversation and monitoring the breathing patterns of 3 sleeping children. Director, how many different species are there in the Coalition? 417 known sentient species. And they all heal differently? Yes, which is why we have species-specific treatment protocols. But they all want the same thing when they're hurt, don't they? They want someone to tell them they're going to be okay. Kresh frowned. That's an oversimplification. Is it? Marcus gestured around the chamber at the children, many of whom were now sitting up and drawing pictures or playing quiet games despite injuries that should have left them unconscious. These kids come from 12 different species, 12 different biologies, 12 different pain responses, 12 different concepts of healing. But you know what they all understood, even before I learned their languages? They understood that when I said, "Easy, buddy, I've got you," I meant it. Mr. Chun, emotional comfort is a recognized factor in medical recovery, but what you're describing goes far beyond psychological support. Marcus looked directly into the holographic projection's eyes. Director, what if healing isn't just about fixing what's broken? What if it's about reminding the broken parts that they're connected to something larger than their pain? Before Kresh could respond, alarms began blaring from Vexhai's medical scanners. One of the children, a young Andromedian whose bioluminescent spots had been flickering weakly, was going into critical failure. Multiple organ systems were shutting down simultaneously. Marcus was at the child's side instantly, his own injuries forgotten. Zeta, hey buddy, stay with me. His hands settled gently on the child's chest, and he began speaking in fluent Andromedian, a language that required both vocal cords and bioluminescent communication. Vexai watched their instruments in amazement. The child's failing organs weren't just stabilizing, they were regenerating at accelerated rates. Cellular damage that should have taken weeks to heal was reversing in real time. How's he doing that? Kresh asked, his voice carrying genuine awe for the first time in the conversation. I don't know, Vexai admitted. But, Director, I've been monitoring his biometrics for the past 4 hours. Every time he heals one of them, he's transferring some of his own life energy. He's literally giving them pieces of himself to keep them alive. That's impossible. Energy transfer of that magnitude would kill a human within hours. Then, maybe humans are more resilient than we thought. Marcus looked up from the Andromedian child, who was now breathing normally and whose bioluminescent spots were glowing with healthy light. Director, can I ask you something? Go ahead, Mr. Chun. In all your years of medicine, have you ever seen someone die who still believed they were going to live? Kresh considered the question. No. Terminal patients who maintain hope do show improved outcomes, but ultimately, biology determines survival. What if it's the other way around? What if hope determines biology? The question hung in the air like a medical revolution waiting to happen. Vexai realized they were witnessing the birth of an entirely new approach to healing, one that acknowledged the connection between mind, body, and spirit as more than just psychological support. Mr. Chun, Kresh said slowly, the Coalition has medical protocols based on 3 centuries of scientific research. And those protocols work for fixing broken bones and treating diseases. But what about fixing broken spirits? What about treating the fear that makes pain worse than it has to be? As if to demonstrate his point, Marcus moved to another child, a small being from species Vexai had never encountered, with gossamer wings and eyes like silver mirrors. The child had been unconscious for hours with severe neural trauma. As Marcus's hand settled gently on the child's forehead, those silver eyes fluttered open. Hello, little one, Marcus whispered in a language that sounded like wind through crystal chimes. You're safe now. The child's wings began to flutter weakly, and a sound like distant music filled the chamber. Other children turned toward the sound, their own injuries forgotten for a moment as they listened to what could only be described as a song of healing. Dr. Vexai, Kresh said quietly, I want you to prepare a full medical brief on everything you've observed. And Mr. Chun. Yes, Director. When this crisis is over, I'd like you to consider coming to Coalition Medical Command. We need to understand what you're doing so we can teach others. Marcus smiled, but there was sadness in his eyes. Director, I appreciate that. But what I'm doing can't be taught from textbooks. It can only be learned by sitting in the dark with someone who's afraid and promising them you won't leave. Then, we'll learn to sit in the dark. As the holographic projection faded, Vexai realized they had just witnessed the beginning of a fundamental shift in galactic medicine. For 3 centuries, the Coalition had focused on treating symptoms and repairing damage. But Marcus Chun was proving that sometimes the most important healing happened in the spaces between medical procedures, in the moments when someone chose compassion over protocol. Marcus, Vexai said softly, the transport ships will be here soon. Are you ready? Marcus looked around at the children, many of whom were now healthy enough to help care for the younger or more seriously injured ones. A network of healing had formed in the collapsed chamber, with Marcus at the center, but no longer carrying the entire burden alone. Doc, I've been thinking about what happens next. What do you mean? These kids are going home to families who thought they were dead. They're going back to communities that are going to ask questions about what happened here. Yes, they are. And they're going to tell the truth. That a human sat with them in the dark and refused to let them die. Vexai understood. You're worried about the political implications. I'm worried that someone tried to murder children to make a political point, and now those children are alive to tell their story. Whoever did this isn't going to be happy about that. Before Vexai could respond, Captain Thorne's voice echoed through the chamber. Dr. Vexai, we're detecting 3 unidentified ships approaching the system. They're not responding to hails, and their configuration suggests military rather than rescue vessels. Marcus's expression hardened. Looks like we're about to find out just how far someone will go to keep these kids from going home. Vexai felt their stomachs clench with realization. The healing was only the beginning. Now, they would discover whether the galaxy was ready for the kind of change that happened when someone refused to let the innocent suffer. Mr. Chun, can the children be moved? Marcus looked around at his charges, then back at Vexai with those impossible eyes that held depths of determination no medical scanner could measure. Doc, these kids have been through hell and back. They're stronger now than when this started. But, more importantly, they know they're worth fighting for. Is that a yes? Marcus smiled, and for the first time since this began, it was the smile of someone preparing for a different kind of battle. That's a promise. The three approaching ships dropped out of hyperspace with the aggressive precision of military vessels. Captain Thorne's voice carried urgent concern as it echoed through the mining station's emergency communications. Dr. Vexai, the ships are transmitting corporate registration codes for Hegemony Mining Consortium. They're demanding immediate surrender of all survivors and claiming salvage rights to the station. Marcus looked up from where he was helping two of the older children pack their small belongings. Drawings they had made in the dirt, small trinkets salvaged from their quarters before the collapse. Hegemony Mining? They're the ones who wanted to expand operations into protected systems. The same systems these children's families have been protesting. Vexai confirmed, pieces of a larger puzzle clicking into place. Dr. Vexai to Captain Thorne. How long until Coalition backup arrives? Nearest Coalition fleet is 18 hours out. The restoration isn't equipped for military engagement. Marcus stood slowly, wincing as the movement pulled at his still healing ribs. For 12 hours, he had focused entirely on keeping 17 children alive through impossible circumstances. Now, looking at their faces that had learned to trust him completely, he realized the hardest part was just beginning. Kids, he said, addressing the group in Standard Galactic. Remember what we talked about? About how sometimes brave people have to make hard choices. The children nodded, their various species expressing understanding through clicks, chimes, color changes, and bioluminescent patterns. They had learned to read Marcus's moods over the long hours in the darkness, and they could sense the shift in his demeanor. Little Kira, the crystalline child whose life Marcus had saved multiple times, stepped forward. Are the bad people coming back? Marcus knelt down to her level, his hand settling gently on her shoulder. Maybe, but remember what I told you about being strong. Strong isn't not being scared. Strong is being scared and doing the right thing anyway. That's right, little star. And you know what? You've all been the strongest, bravest people I've ever met. Vexai watched this exchange with growing understanding. Marcus wasn't just preparing the children for evacuation. He was preparing them for the possibility that someone might try to silence them permanently. Mr. Chun, surely you don't think hegemony would harm children? Marcus's laugh was bitter. Doc, they already did harm children. What makes you think they'll hesitate to finish the job? The communication panel crackled to life with an incoming transmission. Captain Thorne's voice was tense. Dr. Vexai, Hegemony, is demanding to speak with the ranking medical officer immediately. Patch them through. The holographic projection that materialized was a Terran male in expensive corporate attire, his face carrying the cold calculation of someone who viewed everything in terms of profit and loss. I am Director Jonas Blackwood, Hegemony Mining Consortium. You are in violation of corporate salvage rights and interfering with internal security operations. Director Blackwood, I'm Dr. Vexai, Coalition Medical Corps. We're conducting emergency medical evacuation of injured children. Those children are corporate assets. Their families were contracted workers who violated their employment agreements by participating in anti-corporate protests. Return them immediately. Marcus stepped into the projection's view, his presence somehow filling the entire chamber despite his injuries. Director, these children are survivors of an attempted murder. They're not assets. They're people. Blackwood's expression shifted to one of dangerous focus. Mr. Chun, we've been looking for you. I bet you have. You've caused considerable trouble for corporate operations, interfering with necessary disciplinary actions, corrupting valuable assets. I've kept children alive when you tried to kill them. The silence that followed was charged with the weight of an accusation that couldn't be taken back. Blackwood's mask of corporate professionalism slipped, revealing something colder underneath. Mr. Chun, you misunderstand the situation. These mining accidents happen. It's unfortunate, but progress requires sacrifice. Funny how the sacrifices always seem to involve children whose parents oppose your operations. Economic development sometimes faces resistance from those who don't understand the greater good. Marcus took a step closer to the projection, and Vexhai was struck by the transformation in the human. For 12 hours, they had watched him be gentle and caring, a source of comfort and healing. Now they were seeing something else, the same determination and refusal to yield, but focused with laser intensity on a target that threatened his charges. Director, let me make something very clear. These children are going home to their families. They're going to tell the story of what happened here. And the galaxy is going to know that hegemony mining tried to murder kids to protect their profit margins. Mr. Chun, you're one human with critical injuries, surrounded by wounded children on a damaged station in deep space. You're hardly in a position to make threats. Marcus smiled, and Vexhai realized they had never seen a more dangerous expression. Director, you're absolutely right. I'm just one human. But you know what I've learned in the last 12 hours? What's that? Sometimes one person who refuses to give up is stronger than an entire corporation that's forgotten what it means to care about anything except money. As if summoned by his words, the children began moving to stand around Marcus, not hiding behind him, but standing with him. Kira took his hand, her crystalline skin glowing with inner light. The young Andromedian's bioluminescent spots pulsed in a steady rhythm that other children began to match with their own natural luminescence. The chamber filled with the soft music of the Gossamer Winged Child, a song that spoke of hope and defiance and the unbreakable bonds forged in shared survival. You see, Director, Marcus continued, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who had earned absolute trust. These kids aren't afraid anymore. They know they're worth fighting for. And that makes them the most dangerous thing in the galaxy to someone like you. How do you figure that? Because they're going to grow up remembering that someone cared enough to keep them alive when powerful people wanted them dead. And they're going to teach their children the same thing. And their children's children. Vexhai watched Blackwood's expression cycle through calculation, frustration, and, finally, a cold resolve that confirmed Marcus's worst fears. Mr. Chun, I'm afraid I can't allow these children to spread false narratives about corporate operations. For the good of economic stability, some stories must remain untold. Over my dead body, if necessary. The holographic projection cut out, leaving the chamber in tense silence. Marcus looked around at the children, then at Vexhai, his expression carrying the weight of impossible choices. Doc, I need you to get these kids to your ship. Now, Mr. Chun, we're not leaving you behind. You have to. Hegemony isn't going to let them leave if they think the kids can testify. But if they think the only witness is a human engineer who might not survive his injuries. Marcus, no. The voice belonged to Zeta, the young Andromedian whose life Marcus had saved. We stay together. You promised. Marcus knelt down, gathering as many of the children as he could reach into a careful embrace. I know what I promised, and I'm keeping it. You're all going home to your families. Every single one of you. What about you? Asked the Betelgeuse girl. Marcus was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice carried the kind of peace that came with absolute certainty. I'm going to make sure you get there safely. Whatever it takes. Captain Thorne's voice crackled through the comm DR. Vexhai, hegemony ships are powering weapons and moving to attack vector. We need to evacuate immediately. Vexhai faced the hardest decision of their medical career. Protocol demanded they prioritize the greatest number of lives, which meant evacuating the children immediately. But everything they had learned about healing in the last 12 hours told them that separating Marcus from the children would undo all the progress they had made. Mr. Chun, there has to be another way. Marcus stood, his hand settling on Kira's shoulder one last time. Doc, remember what we talked about? Sometimes healing means reminding the broken parts that they want to be whole again. Yes. Well, sometimes protecting what you've healed means accepting that some breaks can't be fixed. Before Vexhai could respond, the station shuddered under weapons fire. Emergency lighting flickered, and somewhere in the distance, structural supports groaned under stress. They're firing on the station, Captain Thorne reported, attempting to collapse the remaining sections. Marcus looked around at the children, his expression filled with fierce protectiveness. Not while I'm breathing. He moved to the chamber's main support beam, a massive metal pillar that had somehow survived the original explosion. Pulling a mining charge from his equipment belt, he began setting up what Vexhai realized was a localized explosive. "Mr. Chun, what are you doing?" "Buying you time. This charge will bring down the tunnel between here and the main shaft. Hegemony troops won't be able to reach the evacuation site, and you'll have 15 minutes to get the kids to your ship. That will trap you here. That's the idea." Kira stepped forward, her crystalline form glowing brighter than Vexhai had ever seen. "Marcus, you can't leave us." Marcus knelt down one last time, his hands settling gently on her face. "Little star, I'm not leaving you. I'm going to be right here, making sure you get home safely. And every time you look up at the stars, you remember that somewhere out there, someone thinks you're the most important thing in the universe." As weapons fire intensified around the station, Marcus activated the mining charge. The timer showed 14 minutes and 37 seconds. "Go, Doc. Get them out of here." Vexhai realized they were witnessing the most profound act of healing they had ever seen. Not the mending of tissue or the restoration of function, but the preservation of hope itself, regardless of personal cost. "Mr. Chun, the Coalition will remember what you've done here." Marcus smiled, and it was the same gentle expression he had worn while singing lullabies to dying children. "Make sure they remember what these kids did here, too. They chose to keep fighting when giving up would have been easier. That's the real miracle." As Vexhai began herding the children toward the evacuation route, they realized that Marcus Chun had taught them something that would change galactic medicine forever. Healing wasn't just about saving lives, it was about proving that some things were worth dying for. The countdown timer read 13 minutes and 41 seconds when the first hegemony soldiers breached the outer chambers. Marcus Chun picked up a mining tool and prepared to keep his final promise. Dr. Vexhai's hands trembled as they guided the 17 children through the evacuation tunnel toward the restoration's docking port. Behind them, the mining charge Marcus had set ticked steadily toward detonation, each second marking another step away from the human who had refused to abandon them. "Where's Marcus?" Kira asked for the fourth time, her crystalline form dimming with distress. "He's keeping us safe," Vexhai replied, trying to maintain the calm authority that Marcus had demonstrated for 12 hours. Just like he promised. Through the station's emergency communication system, they could hear weapons fire and shouting as hegemony forces attempted to breach the sealed sections. Marcus's voice came through clearly, speaking to someone on the other side of the collapsed tunnel. "You're about 8 minutes too late, gentlemen. The kids are already gone." Director Blackwood's voice crackled through the calm, distorted by interference, but still carrying its corporate authority. "Mr. Chun, you've caused enough trouble. Surrender now, and we'll make this quick." Marcus's laugh echoed through the corridors, somehow still carrying the same warmth that had comforted dying children. "Sorry, Director. I've got a promise to keep." Vexhai hustled the children into the restoration's medical bay, where Captain Thorne was waiting with a full evacuation team. "Doctor, we need to leave immediately. Hegemony ships are targeting our engines." 30 seconds, Captain." As the medical team began securing the children in transport pods, Vexhai made a decision that would haunt them for the rest of their career. They activated the ship's communication array and opened a channel back to the mining station. "Mr. Chun, this is Dr. Vexhai. Are you there? Hey, document kids all safe. They're aboard the ship. Marcus, there has to be a way to get you out." "Afraid not. Hegemony brought shaped charges. They're about to blow through my barricade. The children are asking for you." There was a pause, and when Marcus spoke again, his voice carried the weight of someone saying goodbye. Tell them they were the strongest, bravest people I ever met. Tell them that keeping them alive was the most important thing I ever did." "Marcus and Doc, tell the Coalition that healing isn't about the medicine. It's about refusing to give up on people, even when everything seems impossible." The communication cut off just as explosive charges detonated somewhere in the mining station's lower levels. Captain Thorne's voice was urgent. "Dr. Vexhai, we have to leave now." As the restoration pulled away from the dying mining station, 17 children pressed against the medical bay's viewports, watching the place where they had learned that someone cared enough to die for them. The station's emergency lighting flickered once, twice, then went dark forever. But something unexpected happened in that darkness. Instead of despair, the children began to sing. It started with the gossamer winged child's crystalline melody, joined by the Andromedians' bioluminescent harmonies, enhanced by voices in a dozen different languages that somehow blended into something beautiful and defiant and alive. They were singing the human lullaby Marcus had taught them in the collapsed chamber. Vexai realized they were witnessing the birth of something that would spread across the galaxy like a healing virus. These children would go home to their families carrying more than just survival. They would carry proof that compassion could triumph over cruelty, that one person's refusal to surrender could inspire others to fight for what was right. Dr. Vexai, Captain Thorne called from a bridge. Long-range sensors are detecting massive hyperspace signatures. Looks like the Coalition fleet arrived early. Through the medical bay's viewports, space itself seemed to tear open as dozens of Coalition ships dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation. The responding fleet was larger than necessary for a simple rescue operation. Word had spread through Coalition Command about what was happening at Kepler 442c. This is Admiral Korath of the Coalition Defense Force to all hegemony vessels. You're ordered to stand down immediately and prepare to be boarded for investigation of crimes against sentient beings. Director Blackwood's response came across open channels, his corporate composure finally cracking. Admiral, this is a corporate internal matter. You have no jurisdiction. Director Blackwood, we have 17 child witnesses to attempted genocide and 17 more witnesses to unprecedented acts of heroism. We have all the jurisdiction we need. As Coalition ships moved to surround the hegemony vessels, Vexai found themselves surrounded by children who had learned to heal not just their bodies, but their spirits. The crystalline child, Kira, tugged at the doctor's medical coat with small, glowing hands. Dr. Vexai, will Marcus be remembered? The question carried the weight of species-wide hope, and Vexai realized they were being asked to make a promise that would echo through galactic history. Little star, Marcus will be remembered. But, more importantly, what he taught you will be remembered. The Coalition is going to learn new ways to heal because of what happened here. 3 months later, Dr. Vexai stood before the Galactic Medical Assembly presenting the first comprehensive report on what had become known as the Chun Protocol, a revolutionary approach to healing that acknowledged the connection between emotional support and physical recovery. The 17 children sat in the front row of the assembly hall, each representing their home systems as special ambassadors for pediatric medicine. They had become celebrities across Coalition space, not as victims, but as proof that healing could transcend the boundaries of species and biology. The Chun Protocol, Vexai explained to the assembled medical professionals, is based on 3 fundamental principles that challenge traditional Coalition medicine. The holographic display behind them showed Marcus sitting in the collapsed chamber, surrounded by dying children who had learned to live again. First, healing is not merely the absence of injury, but the presence of hope. Second, the will to survive can override biological limitations when supported by absolute commitment from caregivers. Third, sometimes the most advanced medicine is the simple act of refusing to abandon those who need us most. In the audience, medical professionals from 417 different species listened with the attention usually reserved for revolutionary discoveries. Because that's exactly what this was, proof that compassion itself could be quantified, taught, and applied as medical treatment. After the presentation, Kira approached the podium. Her crystalline form had grown taller in the months since the mining station, and her inner light had taken on new depths and colors. Dr. Vexai, she said in perfect Standard Galactic, Marcus taught us that healing isn't about fixing what's broken. It's about remembering what makes us whole. Yes, he did. We want to become doctors. All of us. We want to learn to heal the way Marcus healed us. Vexai looked at the 17 young beings who had survived impossible trauma and emerged stronger, wiser, and more compassionate than most adults. They represented 12 different species, but they shared something more important than biology. They shared the understanding that healing required more than medical knowledge. The Coalition Medical Academy would be honored to have you. As the children gathered around the podium, each carrying drawings and gifts from their homeworlds, Vexai realized that Marcus Chin's greatest achievement wasn't keeping 17 children alive for 12 hours. It was inspiring them to dedicate their lives to keeping hope alive for others. Dr. Vexai asked Zeta, the young Andromedian whose bioluminescent spots now pulsed with confident health. Do you think Marcus would be proud of us? Vexai looked around at these young beings who had chosen to transform their trauma into compassion, who had decided that the best way to honor their savior was to become saviors themselves. I think Marcus would say that he always knew you were going to change the galaxy. He just helped you remember how strong you already were. Years later, when medical students across Coalition space learned about the Chun Protocol in their first-year classes, they would study not just the biological mechanisms of healing, but the story of a human engineer who knelt in the darkness and whispered, "Easy, buddy, I've got you." And in medical facilities throughout the galaxy, whenever healers faced impossible cases and overwhelming odds, they would remember the first rule of the Chun Protocol. Sometimes the most important medicine is the simple promise that you will not give up. The 17 children who had learned this lesson in a collapsed mining chamber grew up to become the most influential medical practitioners of their generation. They established healing centers that treated not just injury and disease, but fear and despair. They developed new protocols that acknowledged the connection between emotional support and physical recovery. They proved that healing was as much about hope as it was about medicine. But most importantly, they never forgot the human who had taught them that the strongest force in the universe wasn't gravity or nuclear fusion or dark energy. It was the decision to care about someone else more than you cared about yourself. In the end, Marcus Chun had done more than save 17 lives. He had planted seeds of compassion that would grow into forests of healing, stretching across star systems and touching billions of lives. And somewhere in the quantum echoes of space, in the memories carried by light itself, his voice still whispered the words that had started it all. "Easy, buddy. I've got you." The galaxy had learned to listen. Every day, as long as you're stubborn enough to believe in it.